I stood there, coffee in hand, watching the excavator tear through my late wife's rose garden like it was nothing more than weeds. The morning sun was barely up, but the sound of metal biting into earth had already woken the entire neighborhood. Behind me, I heard Brenda's scream pierce through the rumble of machinery. My daughter-in-law burst out of the house in her nightgown, her face twisted in a rage I'd become all too familiar with. But this time, I wasn't flinching. This time, I was the one holding all the cards. She ran toward the massive sold sign planted in front of what used to be my home, her bare feet slapping against the driveway. I took another sip of my coffee and watched her world crumble. After 2 years of hell, after being called a freeloader in my own house, after watching her systematically try to erase every trace of my beloved Margaret, this moment tasted sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if someone has ever made you question your worth, stay with me. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to show you that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Let me take you back to where this all started 2 years ago, when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I was doing the right thing. Margaret died on a Tuesday in March. After 42 years of marriage, the house became a tomb of memories. I couldn't put away her reading glasses, her coffee mug, anything. I made coffee for 2 every morning and let the second cup go cold. The neighbors pitied me. I hated that look in their eyes. 2 months later, my son Robert called with what seemed like a lifeline. Dad, Brenda and I have been talking. This house is huge. You're all alone there. What if we moved in for a while just to keep you company? I should have heard the warning in those words. Brenda and I have been talking meant it was her idea. For a while was deliberately vague, but I was drowning in grief and loneliness. The thought of my granddaughter Chloe's laughter filling the empty rooms felt like salvation. Robert had always been too eager to please, always the peacemaker. Even as a child, he'd go along with whatever others wanted. His sister Emma had been the firecracker, but Robert just wanted everyone happy. I didn't see then how dangerous that weakness would become. The lease is up next month anyway, he said too quickly. And the rent keeps going up. This would help us save money and you'd have company. It's perfect. Perfect. I should have known better. 3 weeks later, they moved in. Brenda swept through my home like she owned it, touching her highlighted hair, constantly wearing clothes that seemed far too expensive for people struggling with rent. "Oh, Frank, this place is amazing. Do you know what this house is worth?" She said it like I didn't know, like I hadn't built half of it with my own hands. But Chloe, my 16-year-old granddaughter, she was different. Quiet, thoughtful. She hugged me tight and whispered, "I missed you, Grandpa." When she walked into Emma's old room, still painted the pale yellow Margaret had chosen, she smiled. "It still smells like Grandma's lavender. That first month I thought maybe it would work." Brenda cooked elaborate meals, turning every dinner into a performance. Robert worked long hours at the insurance company, while Brenda stayed home calling herself a wellness influencer, which seemed to mean taking photos of smoothies. Chloe and I spent afternoons in the garage, where I was building her a hope chest. She'd tell me about school, about friends, about the boy she liked. Those moments made it bearable. But slowly things changed. Brenda started rearranging. First small things, moving dish soap, reorganizing the pantry, replacing kitchen towels with ones that matched her aesthetic. Then one day I came home to find Margaret's teacup collection gone from the display cabinet, replaced with succulents. "Where are Margaret's cups?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Oh, those old things, I packed them away. They didn't really fit the vibe I'm going for." She didn't even look up from her phone. The vibe she was going for. In my house, with my wife's things. "I'd like them back." She sighed like I was a difficult child. "Frank, you have to let go sometime. Keeping shrines to the past isn't healthy. Margaret wouldn't want you living in a museum." I retrieved the cups from the attic myself and put them in my bedroom. It felt like retreat, like losing ground, but I told myself it was compromise. That's what you do when people live together. Then the thermostat wars started. I've always run cold worse since my knee surgery. I kept the house at 72, the temperature Margaret and I had agreed on decades ago. But Brenda changed it to 65 every single day. "The utility bills have been insane," she said when I confronted her. "Plus it's better for the environment." The utility bills for the house I owned outright. I started wearing sweaters indoors, kept a space heater in my bedroom. "Pick your battles," I told myself. It's just temperature. But each small surrender was preparing me for the larger war I didn't yet know was coming. Then came Thanksgiving. Brenda insisted on hosting, which I thought was nice. She invited her mother and sister from Arizona, plus some friends from her yoga class. I invited Tom and his wife from next door, and a few old colleagues from my engineering days. It should have been a wonderful day. Brenda spent a week preparing. She hired a professional decorator who transformed the dining room into something from a magazine spread all white and gold, with elaborate centerpieces and place cards written in calligraphy. It was beautiful but impersonal, nothing like the warm, chaotic Thanksgivings Margaret used to host, with mismatched dishes and kids' artwork on the walls. The day itself was tense from the start. Brenda was stressed, snapping at Robert about the timing of the turkey, redoing the table settings 3 times, checking her hair and every reflective surface. I offered to help and was told to just stay out of the way. I wore my good suit, the charcoal one Margaret had helped me pick out for Emma's wedding. It was a few years old but perfectly maintained. I'd even polished my shoes. But when I came downstairs, Brenda looked at me and her face fell. "Is that what you're wearing?" she asked. "Yes, why?" "It's just very out of date, Frank. The cut is all wrong. Don't you have anything more modern?" I felt my face flush. "This is my good suit." She pursed her lips. "Well, I guess it'll have to do. Just try to stand in the back for photos, okay?" Stand in the back, in my own house, at my own table. The dinner itself was more performance than meal. Brenda had created an elaborate tasting menu, 7 courses each, presented with a description of the ingredients and preparation. Her friends oohed and awed appropriately. My friends looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats during the long gaps between courses. When Brenda's mother asked about the house, Brenda launched into a detailed explanation of all the improvements they were planning. "We're thinking of opening up this wall to create more flow, and that dated chandelier needs to go, obviously. Frank has such old-fashioned taste." She said it with a laugh like it was a joke, but her mother nodded seriously. "Well, you've certainly worked wonders already. When Brenda told me about the state of the place when you moved in, I was worried, but you're really making it shine." The state of the place. As if it had been some run-down wreck instead of a lovingly maintained home. After dinner, as people mingled with drinks, I overheard Brenda talking to her sister. I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally. I'd just gone to the kitchen to refill my water glass when I heard my name. "Honestly, Nicole, it's been harder than I expected," Brenda was saying. "Frank is very set in his ways, and living with an old person, you don't realize how much work it is. He's always cold, always fussing about things, being moved, always bringing up Margaret this and Margaret that. I'm trying to make this house ours, but he treats it like a shrine." "Can't Robert talk to him?" Nicole asked. "Robert won't stand up to his father. He just wants everyone to get along. But something's got to give. This is supposed to be our fresh start, our chance to get ahead. We're not Frank's caretakers. If he can't adjust, maybe we need to look into assisted living or something." Assisted living? They'd been here 3 months and she was already planning to ship me off. I set down my water glass and walked back to the party, with a smile frozen on my face. Across the room, Chloe was watching me, and I could tell from her expression that she'd heard it too. When our eyes met, she looked away quickly, blinking hard. That night, lying in bed, I made my first serious mistake. I decided to try harder to get along, to be less of a burden, to take up less space in my own home. If I'd known where that path would lead, I would have made a different choice. But hindsight is always clearer than the view from inside the storm. December brought a whole new level of tension. Brenda wanted to update our Christmas traditions. No more of the vintage ornaments Margaret had collected over the years. No more of the handmade decorations Emma and Robert had made as children. Instead, everything had to match a specific aesthetic that Brenda had planned out on a Pinterest board. "We're going modern minimalist this year," she announced. "White and silver only, very Scandinavian." "What about the kids' ornaments?" I asked. "The clay handprints, the construction paper stars. Those are going in storage. They're sweet, Frank, but they don't fit the look." Robert actually pushed back on this one. "Mom made some of those with us," he said quietly. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "And they've had a good run. But it's time for something new. Your mother is gone, Robert. We can't live in the past forever." The words hung in the air like a slap. Robert's face went white, then red, but he didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked out of the room. I wanted to follow him, to shake him, to ask when he'd become so spineless, but I didn't. I went to the attic and brought down the boxes of ornaments decorating the small tree I kept in my bedroom. If Brenda wanted her sterile white Christmas downstairs, fine. But I would honor Margaret's memory in my own space. That Christmas morning was the first one in 43 years that I didn't wake up happy. We opened presents in the formal living room, sitting on furniture that still felt foreign. Brenda had bought expensive gifts for everyone, presents that Robert's credit card statements would later reveal they couldn't afford. She'd gotten me a smart speaker that I didn't want, and a book about embracing change in your golden years that felt like an insult wrapped in shiny paper. I'd made gifts for everyone in my workshop. A jewelry box for Brenda with intricate inlay work. A desk organizer for Robert. A hope chest for Chloe, finally finished with her initials carved into the top. Chloe cried when she opened it, running her hands over the smooth wood, the dovetail joints, the hidden compartment I'd built into the bottom. "Grandpa, it's beautiful," she whispered. "How long did this take you?" "Since August," I admitted. "Wanted it to be perfect." Brenda barely glanced at her jewelry box. "How nice. Very rustic." She set it aside and didn't look at it again. Later, I found it in the garage, relegated to storing dog treats, even though we didn't have a dog. January brought the beginning of the real trouble. Brenda had apparently spent the holidays researching property values and renovation costs. She started having real estate agents and contractors come to the house, walking through with measuring tapes and tablets, discussing load-bearing walls and open-concept floor plans. One evening, I came home from my weekly chess game at the senior center to find a man I didn't know in my living room, taking photos and making notes. "Excuse me," I said. "Who are you?" The man looked up, startled. "Oh, hi, I'm Derek from Prestige Home Renovations. Mrs. Thompson is showing me around." Mrs. Thompson, not Brenda. Mrs. Thompson, as if she owned the place. I found her in the kitchen with two other contractors, pointing at walls and talking about removing them to create better flow. "Brenda, can I talk to you for a moment?" She turned with an impatient expression. "What is it, Frank? We're in the middle of something. These are major renovations. We need to discuss this." "We are discussing it. That's what I'm doing right now. I mean you and me. This is my house." The contractors looked uncomfortable. Brenda's smile tightened. "Gentlemen, could you give us a moment?" After they left, she turned to me with barely concealed frustration. "Frank, we've been through this. If we're going to live here long-term, we need to modernize. This house is stuck in 1985. The kitchen is dated, the bathrooms are old-fashioned, the layout is closed off and dark. These improvements will increase the property value significantly." "I don't want to increase the property value. I like the house the way it is." "Of course you do, because you're living in the past. But Robert and I are living in the present, and Chloe deserves a home that's current, not a time capsule." "Chloe has a home. This is her home. This is your house, Frank. We're just living in it, unless you want to make us equal partners in it." There it was, the real ask finally out in the open. "This house is my retirement, Brenda. It's paid off. It's my security. And we're paying rent to live here, right?" "Oh wait, we're not. We're living here for free, taking care of you, and you won't even let us make basic improvements." "I never asked you to take care of me. I was fine on my own." She laughed a brittle sound. "Fine, Frank, you were falling apart. This house was falling apart. We saved you from turning into a hermit." I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and unfamiliar. "Get out." "Excuse me." I said get out, you and your contractors. Get out of my house." For a moment, Brenda looked genuinely shocked. Then her face hardened. "Robert," she called. My son appeared from upstairs, where he'd apparently been hiding during this entire exchange. "What's wrong?" "Your father just told me to get out of our home where we live." Robert looked between us, his face anguished. "Dad, come on, she's just trying to help." "By calling this her home. By bringing strangers in to tear down walls without my permission. They're just consultations, Dad. Just looking at options." "Options I don't want." Brenda stepped closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous and soft. "Frank, maybe you're confused. This happens with people your age. Memory issues, difficulty processing new information. Maybe we should have you evaluated. Make sure you're capable of making these kinds of decisions." The threat was clear. Question her authority, and she'd question my mental competence. Robert looked horrified. "Brenda, that's not necessary." "Isn't it? He just tried to throw us out for trying to improve his house. That doesn't sound like rational thinking to me." I felt trapped, cornered. This was my house, but somehow I'd lost control of it. I'd lost control of everything. "I'm going to my room," I said quietly. It was a retreat, and we all knew it. That night, I heard them arguing. Their room was above mine, and their voices carried through the old heating vents. "You went too far," Robert was saying, threatening to have him evaluated. "That's cruel." I didn't threaten, I suggested. "There's a difference. And honestly, Rob, have you noticed how forgetful he's getting? How stubborn these can be signs of dementia? He's not demented. He's grieving, and we're making it worse. We're trying to build a life here. Your father is stuck in the past, and he's dragging us down with him. This house could be worth over $1 million with the right renovations, and he won't let us touch it. Do you know what we could do with that equity? It's not our equity, it's his house. For now, but we need to think long term. What happens when he does start declining? Who's going to take care of him? Who's going to make the hard decisions? We need to be in a position of legal authority before that happens. There was a long silence. Then Robert, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "You mean power of attorney?" Among other things, I've been researching elder law. There are ways to protect everyone's interests. Brenda, that's my father. And he's becoming a liability. I love you, Rob, but you need to open your eyes. We gave up our apartment for this. We can't just leave now. We have to see it through. I lay in the darkness, listening to my son's silence, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about my comfort anymore. This was about survival. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I made breakfast, read the paper, chatted pleasantly with Chloe before school, but inside I was planning. I started with research. I spent hours at the library on their computers, looking up property law, estate planning, elder rights. I learned about financial exploitation, about the legal definition of undue influence, about how easily people could lose control of their lives and assets if they weren't careful. I also started documenting everything. I kept a journal, writing down every conversation, every incident, every change made to the house without my permission. I took photos of Margaret's things that had been packed away. I saved every piece of mail, every bill, every statement. And I started reaching out to old friends. Tom next door, who'd been a civil attorney before retiring. My old colleague James, who had connections in real estate. And Mark, my college roommate, who'd gone on to become one of the best real estate attorneys in the state. Mark and I met for lunch at a diner across town, somewhere I knew Brenda would never go. "Frank," he said, gripping my hand as I sat down. "You look terrible. What's going on?" I told him everything. Every humiliation, every threat, every manipulation. When I finished, Mark was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee with a grim expression. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I want them out, but I want to do it in a way that teaches them a lesson. I'm tired of being treated like I'm worthless. I want them to understand that actions have consequences." Mark leaned back, studying me. "You know, if you really want to make an impact, you have a nuclear option." "What do you mean? You could sell the house?" I stared at him. "Sell it? But where would I go?" "Anywhere you want. You could buy a nice condo, put the rest in trust for Chloe, and still have enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. You'd be free of them, Frank. Completely free." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Sell the house Margaret and I had built our life in. The house where I'd raised my children, where I'd spent 42 years of memories. But then I thought about what it had become. A place where I wasn't welcome. Where my wife's memory was being erased. Where my granddaughter watched her parents systematically strip away my dignity. "Tell me more," I said. Over the next few weeks, Mark and I worked in secret. He found a buyer, a lovely young couple expecting their first child, who'd been searching for a house in this neighborhood for over a year. They understood the situation and agreed to wait for my signal. We had the house appraised, inspections completed, all the paperwork prepared. But there was a problem. If I tried to sell while Robert and Brenda were living there, they could make the process nightmarish. They'd fight it, refuse to cooperate with showings, maybe even file some kind of legal challenge. I needed them to think they'd won, to lower their guard. That's when Mark had a brilliant idea. "What if we let Brenda think she's outmaneuvered you?" "What do you mean?" "We make her think she's gotten power over the house. We let her believe she's won. Then we use that very power to pull the rug out from under her." It was risky. It required me to play a role I'd never played before. I'd have to convince them I was declining, becoming forgetful and confused. I'd have to let them think they were in control. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was perfect. Brenda had already suggested I was mentally declining. I'd just confirm her suspicions. The performance began in February. I started small. I'd forget my wallet when going to the grocery store, forcing Brenda to come rescue me and pay for the groceries. I'd ask the same question twice in one day. I'd leave lights on, lose my keys, shuffle a bit more when I walked. Brenda noticed immediately, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She started treating me like a child, speaking slowly and loudly, as if I'd gone deaf and simple-minded overnight. "Frank, do you remember where you put your glasses?" she'd ask, enunciating each word carefully. "My glasses." I'd look around confused, even though they were right on my head. "I had them just a moment ago." She'd sigh dramatically. "They're on your head, Frank." I'd reach up, feigning surprise. "Oh, so they are, silly me." Robert looked worried, but Brenda looked satisfied. Like this confirmed everything she'd been saying. By March, she was openly discussing my decline in front of me as if I couldn't understand. "I think it's progressing faster than I expected," she told Robert one evening while I sat in the living room, seemingly absorbed in a television show I wasn't actually watching. "He left the stove on yesterday. Could have burned the house down. We need to act soon." "Act how?" Robert asked nervously. "I found the name of a good elder law attorney. We need to get power of attorney Rob before he's completely incompetent. It's for his own protection." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure that's necessary? Do you want to wait until he wanders off and gets lost until he hurts himself? We're his family. It's our responsibility." Our responsibility. The words of someone preparing to take control of someone else's life. A week later, Brenda cornered me in my study with a sympathetic smile and a folder full of papers. "Frank, honey, I need you to sign some documents." I looked up from my newspaper, playing the part of a confused old man. "Documents? What kind of documents?" "Just some routine paperwork. Permits for the city, for the house improvements we talked about. Very standard stuff." I took the folder and looked through it slowly, making a show of squinting at the words, moving my lips slightly as I read. Most of it was indeed permit applications for renovations, but buried in the middle was something else entirely. A durable power of attorney giving Brenda Thompson the right to make legal, financial, and medical decisions on behalf of Frank Thompson in the event of his incapacity or at his direction. This was it, the trap. If I signed this, she could do whatever she wanted. But if I refused, she'd know I was more aware than I'd been letting on. I had to commit to the performance completely. "What's this one?" I asked, pointing to the power of attorney document, but pretending confusion. "Oh, that's just a form saying I can help you with paperwork and bills if you need it. Since you've been so forgetful lately, it makes things easier." I should have felt insulted. I should have felt violated. But instead I felt a cold, calculating satisfaction. She was handing me the weapon I needed to destroy her. "I suppose that makes sense," I said slowly. "You've been so helpful, Brenda." I signed every page. My signature was deliberately shakier than usual, but still legal. I even dated them wrong, writing February instead of March, then crossing it out and correcting it like a man who couldn't keep track. Brenda's smile when she took the papers was triumphant. "Thank you, Frank. You're making the right choice." That night I scanned every page and sent them to Mark with a simple message: "It's time." Mark moved faster than I'd thought possible. The power of attorney Brenda had been so pleased to receive gave her the authority to act on my behalf. But it also gave me, as the principal, the authority to act on her behalf. Mark explained that the document was written broadly enough that either of us could exercise the powers granted. Brenda had been so focused on controlling me that she'd never considered I might use it against her. Within 48 hours, Mark had activated the sale. Using the power of attorney, he signed all the necessary documents. The buyers were ready, closing was scheduled for the following Friday. But I still had to maintain the pretense. For 5 more days, I had to play the forgetful old man while the biggest financial transaction of my life was being finalized. Those 5 days were the longest of my life. Every time Brenda made a comment about my forgetfulness, I had to bite my tongue. When Robert asked if I was feeling okay, I had to assure him everything was fine. When Chloe looked at me with worried eyes, I could only give her a subtle wink when no one else was looking. Wednesday afternoon, Brenda made her final fatal move. I was in the rose garden tending to Margaret's bushes when I heard unfamiliar voices. I looked up to see Brenda giving a tour to 3 people, 2 men in suits, and 1 woman with a camera. "As you can see, this garden would be perfect for a pool," Brenda was saying. "These old rose bushes would need to go, obviously. They're diseased and past their prime anyway." Diseased. Margaret's roses weren't diseased. They were dormant for winter, but they were healthy and thriving. I'd been caring for them for 20 years. One of the men noticed me. "Is this the owner?" Brenda barely glanced my way. "That's my father-in-law, Frank. He's not really involved in the decision-making anymore. I have power of attorney. Not involved in the decision-making, in my own garden, over my wife's roses." "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice quavery and uncertain. "Nothing for you to worry about, Frank," Brenda said dismissively. "Just getting some estimates on improvements. Why don't you go inside? It's getting cold out here." I shuffled away, playing my part, but inside I was burning. She'd already moved from planning to executing. She'd called in contractors, was making decisions, was preparing to tear apart the last physical reminder of Margaret I had. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about Margaret, about the day we'd planted the first rose bush together. We'd just found out she was pregnant with Emma. She'd been so happy laughing as she dug in the dirt, planting a whole garden of memories. Each bush marked something important. Our 10th anniversary, Robert's first birthday, the day we paid off the mortgage, the day Emma got into college, the day Robert got married, and Brenda wanted to rip them all out for a swimming pool. Friday morning came with a peculiar clarity. I'd packed a small bag the night before, things I couldn't bear to leave behind. Photos of Margaret, my wedding ring which I'd stopped wearing but kept in a box, the watch Emma had given me for my retirement. Not much else mattered. I dressed carefully that morning, not in my old clothes but in the good suit I'd worn to Emma's wedding, the one Brenda had mocked at Thanksgiving. I shaved carefully, combed my hair. I looked in the mirror and saw not a doddering old fool, but Frank Thompson, retired, civil engineer, widower, father, and a man who'd had enough. I made coffee 2 cups like always, but this time I poured the second cup down the sink and whispered goodbye to the ritual. This is for you, Margaret. All of it. Mark called at 6:30. Everything's finalized, Frank. The buyers are ready to start renovations today. They want to restore the house to its original glory, by the way, including rehabilitating the rose garden. The roses? They loved Margaret's roses. They're bringing in a specialist to transplant and nurture them. They're even installing a plaque with Margaret's name. I had to sit down. These strangers, these buyers I'd never met, cared more about my wife's legacy than my own son did. At 7 o'clock, I heard the sound of heavy machinery pulling up outside. Then a car door, then another. I heard the contractor, a man named Jim, who Mark had hired, giving instructions. I heard the excavator starting up, the beep-beep of it backing into position. Then I heard Brenda scream. I picked up my coffee, walked to the front door, and stepped out into the cool morning air. Mark was pulling up in his silver BMW just as Brenda burst out of the house in her silk nightgown, her hair wild, her face a mask of absolute fury. "What the hell is going on?" she screamed at Jim. "Who authorized this? Stop right now." Jim, bless him, just pointed at me. "Ma'am, we're working for the new owners. This gentleman can explain." Brenda's eyes found me standing on the front walk, coffee in hand, perfectly calm. For a moment, genuine confusion flickered across her face. Where was the confused, shuffling old man? Who was this person in a suit, standing straight, watching her with cold, clear eyes? "Frank, what is this? What's happening?" Mark stepped out of his car, briefcase in hand, every inch the powerful attorney. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. I'm Mark Hendricks, Mr. Thompson's attorney and representative. I'm here to inform you that this property was sold last Friday. The closing was completed at 2 p.m. The new owners are taking possession today and have requested that all previous occupants vacate by end of business." I watched Brenda's face cycle through emotions: confusion, disbelief, understanding, rage. She looked at the sold sign being planted in the front lawn, at the contractor preparing to work on the yard, at Mark with his expensive suit and official documents, and finally back at me. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice wavered. "Frank can't sell this house. He's mentally incompetent. I have power of attorney. I never authorized this." Mark smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Actually, Mrs. Thompson, you're quite correct that Mr. Thompson couldn't sell without authorization, which is precisely why we used the power of attorney you provided. The document you had Mr. Thompson sign gave you authority to act on his behalf, but it also gave him authority to act on your behalf. We simply exercised that authority. I have the notarized documents right here, all properly executed and filed with the county." I watched her process this, watched her realize she'd been outplayed. "But he's not competent to sign anything. He can barely remember what day it is." "Can't I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was steady, clear, without a tremor. "Tell me, Brenda, what day is it?" "What?" "It's Friday, March 15th. Closing was Friday, March 8th, exactly 1 week ago. The buyers paid $1.2 million for this property, slightly above asking price, because they fell in love with it. The money has been deposited into a trust fund that I established in January, managed by Mark's firm, with my granddaughter Chloe as the sole beneficiary. Every penny will go toward her education, her future, her life, just like Margaret would have wanted." Brenda staggered back like I'd hit her. "You can't do this. I'll sue. This is elder abuse. This is fraud." "Actually," Mark said pleasantly, "Mr. Thompson has been evaluated by 2 separate physicians in the past month. Both certified him as being of sound mind and body, fully capable of making his own decisions. We have documentation of every incident over the past 6 months, the financial exploitation, the verbal abuse, the attempts to manipulate and control. The threats to have him declared incompetent. Would you like to see the journal he's been keeping? Robert appeared in the doorway, his face sheet white. Dad, what's happening? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When had he become so weak? What's happening is that I'm taking back my life, Robert. But where will we go? We gave up our apartment. We don't have anywhere to live. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. This is a cashier's check for $25,000. It's enough for first and last month's rent security deposit and several months of expenses. It's everything I can spare after estate taxes and setting up Chloe's trust. Robert took the envelope with shaking hands. Dad, please, we can fix this. We can work this out. No, we can't. Because you're not the problem, son. Your silence is. Your complicity is. I gave you a home. I gave you love. I gave you everything I had. But somewhere along the way, you forgot what that means. You let her treat me like garbage in the house your mother and I built. You stood by while she planned to tear up your mother's roses. You said nothing when she threatened to have me declared incompetent so she could steal what's mine. I didn't know she was going to do that, Robert protested weakly. You knew enough. You heard enough. You saw enough. And you chose her over me, over your mother's memory, over basic human decency. That's on you. Brenda had collapsed on the front lawn, her silk nightgown spread around her like a deflated parachute. She was crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of thwarted ambition, of a plan years in the making that had just crumbled to dust. Chloe appeared then, running down the stairs with a backpack and a rolling suitcase. She wore jeans and her grandmother's old cardigan, the blue one Margaret had knitted years ago. She didn't even look at her parents. She just threw her arms around me. Can we go now, Grandpa? She asked quietly. You packed? I've been packed since Wednesday. I knew something was coming. You got too quiet. Smart girl, so much like her grandmother. Your parents, Chloe, I said gently. You don't have to leave them. She pulled back and looked at me with eyes far older than 16. Yes, I do. I heard what Mom said about you. I heard what she was planning. I saw what she did to Grandma's things, and I watched Dad let her do it. I'm 18 in 5 months. Then it's my choice legally anyway. But right now, today, I'm choosing you. Brenda found her voice then. Chloe, you can't just leave with him. I'm your mother. Chloe turned to face her. You stopped being my mother the first time you called Grandpa a freeloader. You stopped being my mother when you threw away Grandma's teacups like they were trash. You stopped being my mother when you cared more about Instagram likes than about treating people with basic respect. She turned back to me. Can we go? Mark gestured to his car. I have a furnished apartment waiting. 2 bedrooms, nice view, safe neighborhood. Your grandfather has been planning this for a while. As we walked toward the car, neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Tom stood on his porch, and when he caught my eye, he nodded slowly. He understood. They all understood. I paused at the car door and looked back one last time. Robert was standing next to Brenda, his hand on her shoulder, both of them looking lost and broken. The excavator had moved into position near the rose garden, but I could see Jim talking on his phone, probably getting instructions to hold off until the drama was over. Robert, I called out. My son's head snapped up. I hope you learn from this. I hope you figure out who you are without someone telling you. And I hope someday when you've found your spine, you'll call me. But not before. I'm done enabling your weakness. I got into the car. Mark started the engine. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The house where I'd raised my children, where I'd loved my wife, where I'd spent the best years of my life. It was just a structure now, walls and wood and nails, the real home, the real memories, they were inside me. And I was taking them somewhere safe. The apartment Mark had found was perfect. Modern but warm with big windows that let in lots of light. Chloe immediately claimed the smaller bedroom, saying she wanted me to have the master with the ensuite bathroom. You're getting older, Grandpa. You need the good bathroom. We spent that first day in a strange daze, unpacking the few things we'd brought, ordering pizza, trying to process what had happened. That night, sitting on the small balcony, looking out at the city lights, Chloe asked the question I'd been waiting for. Are you okay, Grandpa? Really okay. I thought about it. Was I okay? I'd just sold my house, the house I'd lived in for over 40 years. I'd effectively cut off my son. I'd destroyed my daughter-in-law's plans and possibly her marriage. I'd upended all of our lives in one dramatic morning. Yeah, I said finally. I am, because I remembered something important. What? That a house is just a structure. What makes it a home is the people in it, and how they treat each other. That house stopped being a home the day I started feeling like a guest in it. But this I gestured at the small apartment. This can be a home, because we'll make it one, together. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm glad I'm here with you. Me too, kiddo, me too. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. Chloe blossomed without the toxic atmosphere of her parents' marriage weighing her down. She made new friends at school, joined the art club, started smiling again. Really smiling, not the careful, nervous smile she'd worn in the house. I enrolled in a photography class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for. I made friends other retirees with their own stories, their own losses, and new beginnings. I started to remember who I was before grief swallowed me, before Brenda made me feel worthless. Robert called occasionally. The conversations were awkward, stilted, full of long pauses and carefully chosen words. He and Brenda were living in a small apartment on the other side of town. Brenda had gotten a job as an office manager at a dental practice, a far cry from her aspirations of being a wellness influencer. Robert was working long hours, doing whatever he could to make ends meet. He never quite apologized, but in his own way, he acknowledged what had happened. I should have stood up for you, he said during one call. I should have been stronger. Yes, I agreed, you should have. I'm trying to be better. It's hard. Brenda's angry all the time. She blames you, but I think she's really angry at herself. That's not my problem to solve, Robert. I know, I'm trying to figure out who I am, who I want to be. That's all I ever wanted for you. 3 months after the sale, I got an unexpected email. It was from the new owners of the house, a couple named Sarah and James. They attached photos of the rose garden. They'd hired a specialist who'd carefully transplanted every bush, nursed them back to health, even added some new varieties. In the center of the garden was a small bronze plaque, Margaret Thompson's garden. May her memory bloom eternal. I cried when I saw those photos. Not sad tears, but something more complex. Relief maybe, or closure, or just the pure joy of knowing that someone somewhere understood what those roses meant. Sarah's email said they'd love for me to visit sometime to see the garden and the house. They'd restored many of the original features, stripping away Brenda's modern aesthetic to reveal the warmth underneath. We're raising our son in a home full of love, she wrote, just like you and Margaret did. 6 months later, I took them up on the offer. Chloe came with me. We pulled up to the house on a Sunday afternoon, and it looked both familiar and transformed. The exterior had been repainted in the original colors, soft blue with white trim. The front porch had been rebuilt with the same careful craftsmanship I'd used 40 years ago. Sarah and James met us at the door with a 6-month-old baby in Sarah's arms. They gave us a tour showing us how they'd opened up the kitchen, but kept its character, how they'd refinished the hardwood floors, how they'd converted the formal living room into a library. But the rose garden was the real miracle. It was spring, and every bush was heavy with blooms. Red, pink, white, yellow, they nodded in the breeze like they were greeting old friends. I walked among them, touching the petals, remembering the day each one had been planted. Chloe found me there, sitting on the new bench they'd installed, crying quietly. You okay, Grandpa? Yeah, sweetheart, I'm saying goodbye, properly this time. I stood up, took one last look at the roses, and smiled. Your grandma would have loved this. New family, new baby roses blooming, life continuing. As we drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Robert and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. It took time, years really, but eventually he divorced Brenda and started the hard work of figuring out who he was as an individual. He apologized, really apologized, not with words but with actions. He showed up for Chloe's graduation. He came to my photography exhibition at the community center. He called just to talk, not because he needed something. We'll never be what we were. Too much happened, too much damage was done. But we're something new, something honest. He's my son and I'm his father, and we're both trying our best. Brenda moved to Arizona to live with her mother. I heard through Robert that she's working in retail, dating, occasionally still talking about the house that should have been hers. She never learned the lesson. Some people don't. Now, 2 years after that Monday morning when I took back my life, I'm sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset. Chloe just started her sophomore year at State University, studying architecture. She wants to design homes that have souls, she says. She comes home every other weekend, and we cook dinner together, trying out Margaret's old recipes and making new ones. I have a new friend, a widow named Patricia. I met at my photography class. We're taking it slow, just enjoying each other's company, laughing at the absurdity of dating in our 70s. She never knew Margaret, so she doesn't compare herself or feel like she's replacing someone. She's just Patricia with her own stories and her own strength. I'm not lonely anymore. I'm not invisible. I'm not a burden or a freeloader or a confused old man who needs managing. I'm Frank Thompson, 73 years old, retired engineer photographer, grandfather friend. I'm living proof that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, to choose your own dignity over someone else's comfort. The money from the house after taxes and legal fees set up a trust fund that will see Chloe through college and grad school if she wants it, with enough left over for a down payment on her first home. It's exactly what Margaret would have wanted. Our legacy isn't a house. It's our granddaughter's future, bright and unencumbered. People ask me if I regret it if selling the house was too extreme. But here's what they don't understand. That house stopped being mine the moment I felt like a guest in it. The moment I had to ask permission to keep my wife's teacups on display. The moment I was made to feel guilty for wanting to be warm in my own home. You can't live in a place where your existence is treated as an inconvenience. You can't build a home with people who see you as an obstacle to their ambitions. And you absolutely cannot sacrifice your dignity, your self-respect, and your peace of mind just to keep other people comfortable. I gave Robert and Brenda every chance. I tried to accommodate, to compromise, to make it work. But you can't compromise with someone who sees compromise as weakness. You can't meet halfway with someone who wants everything and thinks they deserve it at your expense. So yes, I made them homeless. I took away their plans, their comfort, their illusions about who held the power, and I do it again without hesitation. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the full consequences of their actions. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who will never see your value. Margaret's roses are blooming in the garden of a family who appreciates them. Chloe is thriving in a life free from toxicity. I'm building something new, something authentic, something that honors both who I was and who I'm becoming. That Monday morning when I stood with my coffee and watched Brenda's world fall apart, I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. Clear about my worth, clear about my boundaries, clear about what I would and wouldn't accept. I'm 73 years old, and I finally understand what Margaret tried to tell me for 42 years. Love isn't sacrifice. Love is mutual respect. Love is lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. Love is making space for someone in your life while still maintaining your own space, your own value, your own self. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by how people treat each other. Robert is my son by birth, but he stopped being family when he chose silence over standing up for what was right. Chloe is my granddaughter by blood, but she became true family when she chose love and integrity over comfort and convenience. If you're reading this and you're in a situation like I was, feeling small and invisible and trapped, please listen. You deserve respect. You deserve dignity. You deserve to feel valued in your own home, in your own life. And if the people around you can't provide that, if they treat your needs as inconveniences and your existence as a burden, then they've made a choice. The question is, will you make yours? Don't wait until you've lost everything. Don't wait until you've been ground down so far that you can barely remember who you used to be. Choose yourself, set boundaries, stand firm, and if necessary, walk away. The path might be scary, change always is. But on the other side of that fear is a life where you matter, where your voice counts, where your presence is valued rather than tolerated. That life is worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. I gave up a house, but I gained my self-respect, my peace, and a chance to live my remaining years on my own terms. That's not a loss, that's liberation. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? What would you have done in my place? Was I too harsh? Or was this exactly what needed to happen? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Because standing up for yourself isn't just my story. It's a message we all need to hear. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let everything else burn.